Hey everybody, this is Tony Konichek, a video producer at Privateer Press.
And this is Ron Kruzie.
And Ron's on screen right now. Ron, what's your job at Privateer?
It's still a studio director.
And so we're kind of hanging out. This is a video that Ron and I made more than 10 years ago. I
Yeah.
think this was probably something we started doing at the end of 2007, and I think we finished it and released it in 2008. And there's the younger Ron.
Yeah. Yeah. I just rewatched this video and it's a trip. Like it's still a relevant video too. Like I actually like it. It was funny because I was actually learning techniques that I learned and had forgotten. And I was like, why am I doing that? And I'm like, oh, yes. Things have changed. Things have advanced.
Had you been much on camera before we did this video?
No. No. There's still times I think about recording this video because it took a while. There's times I still chuckle to myself thinking like, wow, that was a lot of fun. And there's moments where it's kind of cringy, like I can't believe I did
that. So like, for me, when I produce this, the first thing to note is that because of the time, I mean, even YouTube had only been around, like been a big staple in the culture for a few years. And as you can see, like the video itself is a square screen. I mean, this is a 4:3 aspect. So this was, HD was available.
Yeah.
But we were still using cameras that had 4:3 aspect. And we recorded this on tape.
Wow.
Like on an actual tape that you put into a camera. And then I had to take the tape out and put it into a deck and edit everything from that. So
yeah, because I remember after we made this video, it was like, this wasn't a couple years afterwards. It was like watching digital video on computer screens was like the new thing.
Yeah, well, we had produced this product as a DVD, which now is a bit anachronistic, but at the time it was a big discussion on how it was going to be made and produced and delivered. So now it's cool that so long after that we get to post this up online for everybody to see.
So I was watching this video and I was listening to the commentary and I was thinking like when that hobby knife came up, where it was just like I was all like in my writing, I was like respect the knife, because I was thinking like at this time in my life I had just ended a 14-year culinary career and I was in martial arts, so I still had, and I still do, but I had a strong and I actually went to school for primitive living skills. So like all of these art forms use knives.
Right.
Every job I've ever had has been focused around a knife. And so I had a real strong, like, respect the blade attitude. And it comes through the video a lot.
For filling gaps between parts of a miniature.
I know when I've been a miniature painter for a long time, and for our viewers, Ron and I have known each other for 20 years. And so that's how we kind of connected to do this video. But when Ron gave me the script and I would go through it to edit it to make it into a video, I was trying to puff up my I paint miniatures too chest and kind of get in there and add my 2 cents. And it is one of those where you quickly learn that sometimes you think you are in league with something and then find out that you're not, because time and time again, I was just, Ron was showing me why certain ways that I thought you painted were either, outdated or needed to be improved and things. So it was kind of one of the benefits of being able to do videos with professionals is to kind of see how things really get done, right? And again, pre-YouTube days, there wasn't nearly as much access to information for kind of niche hobbies.
Oh, that's so true. Because I know like a lot of my painting knowledge and painting skill was all mostly self-taught, because there wasn't anything out there. Like I remember some of my teachers later in the years were like, yeah, there's this thing called the internet. You should go on there sometime, and there's other painters on the internet that have sharing their techniques. And And I learned a lot by doing that. And nowadays, it's like there's so much information out there. People can get real good real quick.
Yeah. Well, that at the time, again, that there were some emerging videos that were coming out. I think there was one that
Yep.
came out as we were getting ready to release this, and I remember feeling kind of devastated because it was like we were going to make this painting video, nothing like this really existed,
Mm-hmm.
and then right before we released it, somebody else released theirs, and I remember going,
Yeah.
"Oh, somebody got there first."
Yeah.
After
Like-
that, you started seeing more DVDs of professional painters.
There was like a dozen came out within
Yeah.
a year of this one.
Yeah.
I remember when we originally thought of this idea. I remember Matt Wilson's just like, okay, because we thought this idea, you can guarantee there's 15 other people that are doing it right now. So
Yeah.
move quickly. And it's just like, he was right.
Using the
Yeah.
clippers, remove any large chunks of unwanted metal.
But again, this was long enough ago that video was it was emerging or had emerged as something that was approachable for many people. But again, you had affordable camcorders, but professional quality was still going to cost you thousands of dollars. You know, you didn't have your iPhone. You couldn't automatically stream places. Even uploading to YouTube was it was getting more common, but it still wasn't a thing that professional companies and professionals were thinking of as a way to release their content. So so this was a big deal for us to put together because it took quite a bit of effort.
Yeah, that's true. I remember like one of the biggest challenges was like the artist's line of sight wants to be in the same location as the camera's line of sight. So while this is all happening, like I'm having to get the project that I'm working on and like I'm having to like tilt it
Yeah.
30 degrees over so the camera's looking at it, but you're looking at it kind of from the side. And that was always a struggle.
I don't know. In my what I have seen, I have not seen anybody solve that problem yet.
Yeah.
People have certainly done it really well to be able to see what you're doing, but it's just always a little off. I want to point out a bit about the editing for these. So all of the chapter graphics of the animated jacks coming together and stuff, that was done by a graphic animator named John Nieris many years ago. This was before I could do these graphics myself. So I edited the whole video, but all those cool looking graphics and lower thirds were all custom animated by an animator. That I was not up to that skill level at that point. So it's kind of cool to go back and see how that stuff was put together. And then nowadays I could be like, oh yeah, I could totally do that now. Like piece of cake. But back then it was a huge big deal.
Right.
And then some of the interior animations that happen within the video that aren't the snazzy chapter titles were all done by me. But I was pulling a lot of 15-hour days, 15, 16-hour days while these were editing.
It's fun watching this video game because all these techniques, they're all still, I still use these techniques all the time.
This blue tack technique you're showing here right now is one I still use to this day.
Yeah.
I learned it by watching you, and now I still use it.
Yeah. So like right here, like another technique I do a lot right now, like right now I would actually get pliers and I would pinch the tip of that brass wire a little bit so it actually fit in the hole snugger and there's less chance of it spinning. You know, it's also a good technique if you're trying to like pin multiple joints together at the same time. It's like you kind of grip the wires and it kind of holds the piece together as you're building it.
Just is that because it increases the width of the wires some so that it just grabs in there? Okay.
Yeah. So it's you basically put the wire into the hole and it just doesn't like freely spin. It actually like stays in place. So you can actually then bend the pieces.
Don't overdo it with the glue. A little goes a long way. Try not to get it onto your hand.
I like how the music is still fun. Like there's a lot of bass slapping and like I don't know, pseudo minimal techno, and I still like it. You know, I was a little afraid of that, but I was like, oh, the music's still fun.
Yeah, I'm a big one for music in videos. I think music drives um, videos really well. I think that choosing a piece of music will affect your tone. It affects the pacing. Um, it's one of the worst things to do. Like looking for music for a video like
Yeah.
this is really challenging. But once you can find something that works, uh, it it can make all the difference. You want to find something that's not annoying to have to listen to.
Yeah.
This video is over an hour or so.
Yeah. But I was rewatching this. This was really interesting because I had forgotten information that's about to come up about like using different ratios of the putty to create different effects. Like,
Isn't
I
that
literally
isn't that
forgot about
weird?
that.
Like the information generates with you,
Mhm.
and then yeah, forgetting all about it. But
Yeah.
stuff in this video comes up for me all the time, and I realize that what's common knowledge for me now, a lot of it did come from working on this video with you.
Yeah. And what's really fun is like when I was writing this information, like it was like all the knowledge that I had accumulated over the years. Okay, granted, it's all like this video is meant to be kind of baseline intro,
Right.
right? So we started getting into like painting techniques. You know, it's like there's a lot still to know about like all this information on building models and all the tips and tricks. Like there's actually a lot of good info in here. And a lot of this I gained from working with other professionals in the studio, like sculptors and other painters and other really uh, experienced hobbyists. So it's there's a lot more. It's not just one person. There's a lot of information here. Because I recently listening to somebody who recently got on the hobby, and they were talking like they're like I don't even know how to put a metal model together because metal is one of the like there's a lot of materials now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's not just like metal, resin, plastic. There's multiple types of plastics. There's printer
Different types of
resins now.
resins. Yeah.
Yeah, there's different types of metals, different qualities of resin. You know, and they all require a little bit different approach. And another thing too, it's like one thing I would love to have shown in this one was like when you're trying to like when you got like a figure and it's metal figure or resin, and like the figure has got two separate arms, and they're supposed to be, and the arms are supposed to like touch each other. Like one has a gun, and the other arm is like holding the bottom of the gun, and you're trying to like glue it together. Like a technique would be to like get two tiny balls of putty and put them in like the arm sockets with glue. So you're kind of combining glue and putty at the same time, and you push the arms into the putty glue mix on the arms, and it's actually like the putty and glue hold the arms onto the model, and you can maneuver the arms in place where you want to be, and you let go of the model and it holds it in place, and it dries that way. And it's actually it's a core technique that it's like it causes what I'm trying to get out here. There's a lot of frustration coming trying to glue multiple pieces together at the same time.
Yeah, well, like, trying to, like, I've done that a lot where I've just got this weird grip on my fingers, because you're trying to
Yeah.
hold the shoulder joints in, but then you're using like your ring finger or something to keep the gun or the attachment point steady, and
Yeah.
the glue's not drying fast enough, or I'm gluing my finger to the joint because it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
To a priming board. You don't have to do this, but it helps prevent the.
I admit I've actually never done that.
What, take them all to a priming board?
Never to a board. I would prime everything either flat on a piece of cardboard.
Yeah.
In my garage, or like in an overturned cardboard box to prevent overspray sometimes.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I'll foam tape it to the cap of a spray can, and I'll spray it, which is effectively like putting it on a board.
I either just balance my models on the board or I blue tack them on. But it's funny because I used to spray prime in the back of this alley here. I remember one time I was rattle canning, and like this group of like dudes that worked at the factory next to us, they all jumped over and they're all like getting ready to fight me because they thought I was some guy like tagging the wall.
Oh, really?
And I looked at them and they're like, I was just like, I wouldn't have been nice, son, to find me over here tagging the wall. Not today, buddy. And we all laughed.
Yeah. So that alleyway that Ron's in, that was actually the back alley behind our production facility when our offices were over in Bellevue, Washington.
Like I still use this double-sided stick tape on like a wooden dowel.
Yeah.
Like that is such an effective way to hold a model while you're painting it.
Yeah. There are times I find myself painting models where I did it so long holding the bases that while I certainly prefer having them on a cork or a cap or something, that I'll just pick up models and start painting, and I'll be working on them for a long time before I realize that I've mounted it on nothing. I've just been working it with the base, but I've also dropped a lot of models that way.
Yeah.
So I gotta give a quick shout out. So the guy who lit, who was there doing the lighting and helping with the camera work and stuff was Sean Porter, who has actually gone on to be a successful DP in Hollywood. He is the one who shot and lit the movie Green Room.
Nice.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah, I remember that crew you hired was really professional.
I like professional people.
Yep.
And we shot this, so this stuff with Ron, I think we did this over 2 days. We shot all of the stuff of you painting and you talking at the camera in a couple of days. And we had to get you talking done first when the office was quiet. So I think this was like 6 a.m. or something, throwing you under lights and getting you to talk. And we were trying to hurry through it before the rest of the employees started showing up and making too much noise.
I know. I remember like because we couldn't have the fax machine on.
Oh yeah, somebody offered to turn off the fax machine for us, and Wilson later was reprimanding us for turning off the fax machine. He's like, that's how we get orders. Like that's how we make money.
Yeah, I remember that.
Of water, just enough to loosen the paint so it flows nicely. If you feel the mixture is too thin, add some more paint. If it's too thick, add some more water. After a while,
yeah, I'm giggling at some of these animations. I don't know that I would do them too differently nowadays.
Yeah,
like,
that's the thing.
A little smoother, a little slicker, but
yeah, it's like it's like, well, what do I do differently now? And sometimes it's just like not a whole lot.
Yeah,
I watch this and I think like I wouldn't do that now. Like my techniques have changed so much over the years. Like some of this is just something I would do, but it's still very valid information, right? Like
yeah.
I really talk a lot about layering and washing and dry brush in this video, but like layering, it's like, it still looks really attractive. I find it to be kind of cartoony now, right? That was always my style. My style was always very cartoony, right?
Where you've got like a hard edge with no blending?
Yeah, hard edge with no blending, which I still think looks good. It looks really good on a tabletop too, and it's simple. It's easy to wrap your head around. The two hardest parts about it is sometimes it's hard to figure out where the light actually hits and where the shadow really is, because that's what a lot of what I deal with nowadays is like, it's really knowing where the light's coming from.
Right.
And the other thing is like, one of the reasons the style is cartoony is because the colors are perfect. Like you have this mid-tone, then you have like this perfect highlight and a perfect shadow. And what I mean by perfect, it's like, it's just the color is too perfect. Like it's just a darker version and a lighter version. And that creates like really stark cartoony look to it, right? Where, I'm not really playing with like color temperatures or tones and stuff where it's like, you won't see me like, shading like green with a purple. You'll see me shading green with a darker green.
Right.
So that's one of the differences.
Is that just for simplicity?
Well, I think at this time, like it's just in my mind's eye at this time of painting miniatures, it's like that's how you did it, right? You used mid-tone blue and you used dark blue for shadow and you used a light blue for highlight, and it was just that simple, right? It's just years later as I was becoming, a better artist, I started realizing like, oh, there's this concepts like color temperatures and stuff that you do to make things more interesting.
Well, that's like for me with miniature painting, and it did start to happen right after this video, but again, like I was saying, that I thought I was a great miniature painter, or at least a competent one, was that you have these fundamentals, and the fundamentals are typically very direct and obvious. Like I can teach you this, right? And then if you also do this, you can accomplish it. And then as you kind of hit a mark right after those fundamentals where it starts to become much more abstract what you can do to achieve what. There isn't an obvious direction. You start having to combine ideas and bringing in these other things. So
yeah, because these are all still really, really valid techniques.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as I was watching the video, I was finding myself being like, oh, don't, you know, like, I hope you show them this mistake and how to avoid it. And like, sure enough, it's just like, oh yeah, I totally showed them how to do that correctly, you know? Like dry brushing, like I still dry brush things. It's still a valid technique, you know. Even like some of like the later studio models that we first did the Colossals, like we were dry brushing the metal on it, you know.
Yeah, I still dry brush all the time. My daughter I've been teaching her to paint miniatures, and she was telling me the other day, she was showing me a miniature she painted. She had learned about dry brushing, so she started dry brushing. She was very proud of it, and it looks super cool.
Because like one of the things I do now a lot is I'll base coat my models black like a rattle can. Then I'll get airbrushable primer, then I'll finish it off with airbrushable primer like black, and then I'll spray a really concentrated white ink over the model. And I create kind of like, that's how I create my light. So I kind of like form my light and shadows before I even paint the figure, you know.
That's the zenithal priming, right?
Yeah. And so sometimes you might shift the direction of light, or you might actually have multiple light sources. You kind of have a thing called the Jesus effect, where you might light up the face more, you know. You might do it all around the model, but then you like light up the face more. Or if you're like doing a horror figure or something, you might, you know, have like the light coming from like stark sideways. And then when I'm painting, I'll do more like glazes over the figure, so you can see the dark and the light underneath, right?
Right.
And I do a lot of glazes, and then I'll do things like use warm shadows or cool highlights, or cool shadows and warm highlights. You know, I play a lot more with that now. It looks more interesting and it's really fast, right? But what I'm showing in this video gives you these really like brilliant like figures that look good on the table, you know. Another thing too, it's like I'm showing people how to make washes here. Like this was before I think companies were doing commercial washes. I know that we had a couple, and I'm sure somebody else had a couple out there. But excuse me, I'm sure a few other people had a couple out on the market, but this was before like washes were readily available to buy.
Yeah, I do remember that. I really like the P3 line because they had the different color washes.
Yeah, and so this is good information because I'm showing you how to make your own wash, right? And the only difference I would do now is like now in my water, I put a little bit of flow enhancer in there, like 1 part out of 10 flow enhancer. It loosens it up a little bit and it gives you a little more control, right?
Yeah.
And you can like add or subtract flow enhancer or the mixing medium to your wash to get different effects.
Yeah.
Because now it's like sometimes when I'm doing terrain, I'll make like a half gallon of wash, right? And at that point, you're kind of like pulling out like your actual measuring cups and stuff, and you're actually using science to make like a good blend.
Jeez. We still get we get tons of questions on Get Your Paint On about the differences between washes and glazes, which I don't think we touch on glazes in this at all.
No, not in this video, right? I think glazes are so, you know, so what everything you've seen in the last 2 minutes has been a wash, right? Where it's like it's thicker, it's a little stickier, and the idea is that it kind of like here it settles in the cracks, you know, and it shades the recesses, not the cracks, but the, you know, the depressions on the 3D model, right? Or it kind of like wants to hug up against details. So if you have like a flat surface with a rivet on it, the wash is going to want to like pull up around the rivet, you know. That's kind of what a wash does, right? Well, a glaze is just really like a thin down ink or a thin down paint. Well, it's almost like a watercolor, where it's like you're more staining the surface,
right?
And you're not necessarily wanting it to pool in the recesses or pool around details. It's more of a stain, And you're just like, you're literally like layering these stains on top of each other to create effects. A lot of times, like I just recently painted a model last night where I painted the skin kind of like a leather color, and I thought at the end, I'm like, oh, it's too bright, it's too much pastel in the skin tone. So I made like a darker leather glaze, which was just a really thin down paint. And then I just I painted this thin down paint over the whole figure, and it converted this washed out figure, and it made it look a little darker, and it made it look richer in color. And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted right there, right? So a lot of times, okay, here's an example of the Protector to Menoth figures. Like when we would paint the Sanguine outfit, then you have like the red sashes or the red streamers.
Right.
You paint the whole model Sanguine, including the red sashes, including the streamers, all the Sanguine, right? Then at the very end, we would just get red ink and we would glaze over areas of the Sanguine that we wanted red, and it just made it red.
Okay.
Rather than painting the Sanguine area Sanguine and the red area is red, you paint it all Sanguine and you just glaze right over the Sanguine to create the red. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
It's really fast way, and you can like change colors, right? Interesting too. It's like I was watching this earlier, and I was thinking how like I'm telling people like, yeah, here you paint blue. If you want blue shadow, you just add black to it. If you want a lighter blue, you add white to it. Like gray and blue are like one of the few colors where you can actually add white to the paint and it looks correct.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it becomes tricky with things like, reds and.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't really get into the video, like that color theory, how to mix properly, how to really work with colors isn't really covered in this video. But like what you're seeing right now, like this is it. Like that looks, you know what? That looks good. It looks good on the table.
It's gonna get you there, right? Yeah. And I struggle with this as a painter. Is that it's real easy to get lost in the weeds of all the different ways you can do things. And sometimes it's fine just to go, you know what? This looks good.
Yeah.
This is just fine, right?
Yeah. Because I used to think like, oh, those blends were like, there was a time where I was just like, oh, the blends, it's all about the blends, like perfect blends. And now it's like, nah, nothing about the blends. I don't even care about the blends anymore. Now it's all like color composition and color temperatures and color choices, and that's what matters to me more than anything, right? Because that's what I struggle with.
Where on the figure do you want to paint them?
Although you can paint with any colors you like, we're going to use the standard Signar colors for this ironclad. The base paint colors are Signar Blue Base for the armor, Roulet Gold for the armor trim, Thamar Black for the shoulders.
So these are the things that took a while
to
film, because Ron had to paint each of these miniatures in real time so that we got the process. So even though, you're only seeing, I don't know, probably like 10 minutes of each of these full paint throughs, but this was hours of work for us. We had, and Matt DiPietro was a studio painter, and he would sit off to the side, and while like in between shots when we had to adjust things or do stuff, he would be there to like do quick changes or touch-ups while we were either filming something, or he'd be prepping the next model for you to start with, or kind of as we jump between. So I think, Ron, do you remember, did we have, it was only a single miniature per section, right? Or did we have some that were pre-staged so that you would paint portions of one and then pick up one that had been painted to that part? Yeah.
Because I remember like years later, like I just had like a box where all these type of models went into from like No Quarter and this video. I just kind of tossed them all into a box. And I remember like, a new Privateer Press employee would get hired. They'd come to the studio and they would see that box and just be like, this is how you treat these classic models? And I'd be like, oh yeah.
So I
remember I only had like one version of all these figures, is what I was getting at there.
Yeah. So we'll see it later, but the rake that you paint from Legion, I have that on my desk.
Nice.
I have that miniature on my desk. We came across it one day, and I knew that it was the rake because, again, for time, you're only ever seeing the front of these models.
Yeah.
Like all the models that you're seeing at the end of the section when they're done, if you were to turn that model 180, like the whole back is not painted.
Yeah.
So I have the rake on my desk, half painted. Like it's not, the backside is not painted at all. And I tend to keep it that way forever. This is definitely my my souvenir from making this video with you, is that rake.
Nice.
Once it's done, let it dry, and then go back to dry brushing. This time, paint over the umbral umber with Roulet Gold. Use as many coats as necessary to get in.
Yeah, and of course things like, you know, all the shots of Ron putting paint into trays were out of order.
Oh, that's
because
right.
we didn't have multiple cameras, so we had to get a shot of your palette and the table and the water and lit correctly and looking good, and then we just had a list where it was like, okay, Ron, use cold steel. Okay, Ron, now dry brush some Roulet Gold. Okay, Ron, now do this color. Just a whole list of them, and then we would move the camera setup, get set up for shots of miniatures, and then you would just paint miniatures for hours. You know, and the whole time, I'm saying like, Ron, get closer. Ron, aim that towards the camera. Okay, let me focus. All right, pull the brush out. Okay, put the brush back in. And Ron's like, I can't paint that and aim it at the lens and at the same time. And, you know, I still struggle now when I'm shooting miniatures that, you know, getting too close. I love to see close-ups, and I like to fill the frame with the details. And sometimes I've kind of learned to back off a little bit over the years. It took me a while, but they don't always look the best when you're that close. It's too close.
Well, it's like right here, I'm painting those rivets. It's just like I'm painting those rivets off to the side.
Yeah.
And you can tell that the brush is missing its mark sometimes because I don't even see what I'm actually painting, you know?
Yeah.
The other thing too I remember was the heat, because he had all those lights.
We have lights. There's so many lights.
Always like these tents and all these light diffusers around you. And I remember just being really hot, and like sometimes the paint would start drying on you.
Yeah.
Or I'd just start getting frustrated, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it continues to be a challenge between the video producer and the painter, because video producer has a visual need of things to be a certain way. And then of course the painters have a way they need to be able to do things to paint. And there's an intersection between those two that is a constant struggle to balance correctly so that everyone's doing what they need and getting what they need.
Yeah, I remember like one of the things I had to train myself is like, sometimes when you're painting, you like flip the model upside down.
Yeah.
Or you hold it sideways and you have in this contorted positions, and like having to paint the model like, you know, like having a holder just holding on the model so it doesn't ever like move too much off camera.
You can see it happening here.
Yeah.
Like the angle at which you're painting a lot of that stuff is not how you would do it.
Quick coats of paint. The coverage will even out nicely. Try not to paint in the recesses between the armor plates. Keeping black.
I do think if you look closely at this model, there's a few points at which you can see that the back isn't painted.
Yeah.
That we haven't even touched the back yet, or even the back of the big forearm, that big armor plate. I think there's a clear end line where you don't go around the back.
To begin highlighting the armor in 4 stages. The first stage is the base coat of Signar blue base that's already painted.
So like this is interesting here, because like when I'm painting this blue, like I'm just like kind of painting like lines on around the edges of the armor plates.
Right.
And that is its like own particular style, right?
Right.
But when I'm painting this armor here, I kind of pay a little more attention to where the actual light would hit the actual model. In other areas, I'm just painting, I'm tracing around the armor plates, right?
Right.
And there's 2 different philosophies going on there, and they're kind of colliding. And the more I learned how to paint and where to put the light and where to put the shadows, like the style of like kind of painting around the edges or the style where you paint everything raised is highlighted and everything sunken is automatically in shadow regardless of where the light's coming from. Like those philosophies started to clash, and I had to like mentally choose one, like either choose like light, like real light, or choose this stylistic like trace around detail style. I don't know what it's called, but there was a couple years in my life where I was struggling with where these two styles were conflicting each other.
Right. How would you do this now if you were going through this process? I mean, you know, using similar colors and similar techniques, but how would you paint it differently?
That's a really good question. I think nowadays I will lay down a lot of those initial layers are going to be done through an airbrush.
Ah, right, yeah.
And maybe all of the metal, like I'd probably do all the metal with an airbrush.
Okay.
And then I would just work over the metal. And I wouldn't blacken in the metal. I would just work directly over the metal, right?
Okay. It is my memory at this time that airbrush was not a commonly used tool in miniatures painting. I mean, I'm sure somebody used it, but I wasn't aware of it beyond vehicles, maybe vehicles.
Yeah, because I remember at this time I was I was subscribing to a lot of model, magazines for like painting model kits.
Right.
And I look back, and I still kept it all. As I look back at them now, and even those techniques are really dated. You know? And yeah, because I owned an airbrush, but I had a really cheap airbrush, and I didn't realize I had a cheap airbrush, and so I didn't use it a lot. I remember Brian Degas came in the studio, and we had just hired him, and he looked at the airbrush I was using, and he says like, "What are you using that for? Like, get a real airbrush." And then he goes, "Once you get a real airbrush, you're gonna realize, you're gonna see the difference." And like I think within 2 weeks, I had purchased a really nice, legitimate airbrush. And I remember just being like, "Oh," and I had felt like I had been conned this whole time using this cheap airbrush. Like it was a game changer for me.
Yeah, you can work with a lot of different levels of tools, right? I'm a big proponent of like, I don't need the best of everything. I just need something that works. But there are certain tools where while you don't need the Mercedes of the tool, there's a big difference when you just get something that's actually good and you immediately know why it's good.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't use an airbrush because sometimes I don't want to, I get tired, especially in the middle of winter time, where you're just like, I don't want to go out in the garage and airbrush all this stuff. I'm just going to hand paint it. So I kind of slipped into this, like I airbrush everything. And I teetered back to just being like, just hand paint it. You know what I mean? Just put some Netflix on and hand paint it. But nowadays, like it's pretty standard that I base coat everything black and I just spray the white ink from above.
Yeah.
As it's just kind of like, that's pretty much my starting point now, regardless of how I'm painting it.
Well, that's a much simpler version. I tried a few times back in the day to take a photograph with a camera, pull that image off the camera card, plug it into the computer, pull it into an image manipulation program, and then drop the color out of it. All of which at the time didn't feel like a lot of steps, but compared to how fast you could do that now, it was a lot of work to basically get a black and white image of the model to be able to work from as a reference for what might be in light and what might be in shadow. And who knew that the much easier and more effective fix was just to spray paint the thing white.
Yeah, because it kind of just tells you where to put it.
Yeah.
And like what I've learned is like when you're kind of doing the white over the black, it's kind of like like widen the light direction of the white. Like just don't go straight from top down, like angle it around, right?
Okay.
Because I guess it kind of depends what you're trying to go for, right? If you're painting a model where it's like this model is meant to be like inside of a room with like directional light, then yeah, I guess airbrush the white with some directional light, right? But you know, if your origami figure is fighting outdoors, then the light's going to be really diffused, you know.
Right.
So airbrush that white in a diffused manner, so the shadows aren't so stark. And it's just, you know, light is the most relative thing in the world, so it's hard to really like have it. You can't have a clean cut answer. There's just different approaches to it.
So there's model number one. I'm also realizing that this video is, it actually has interlaced lines. Again, going back to the time in which it was shot. Just, you know, I've been looking at HD footage for so long now that how unclear this image is compared to what it would be like nowadays. It has been compressed a little bit.
Techniques with a focus on how to apply them to people instead of machines. In addition, I'll show you how to use washes and alternative dry brushing. When painting the ironclad, we learned it is best to start with the most recessed areas. Because Source's face is recessed, painting it means getting paint on everything else around it, making it rather messy. Not only that, but starting with the face also helps create the figure's personality.
This one's a fun one to watch 10 years later.
Yeah.
That's like some people when they paint, they'll paint the face first. And then some people will paint the face last. And like there's almost a lot of times there's like two different camps of when you do this.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any like what the Venn diagram for that is, right? Like if it's a part of me is like, I think I usually end up painting at least part of the flesh first, just because it's like that's the most exciting part. And so it's get right to it. So unless there's a reason to avoid it right away, I'll tend to go for flesh and things first.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about what I do now. It's like I still find myself painting things where it's just like you paint the thing that's messiest first, and then you work from there, right? I still generally follow that.
I think that was your philosophy at this time. I remember we had that conversation.
Yeah. And so another thing I've been doing recently that I've really been enjoying is like when I was younger, I tried to copy what I saw in the magazines and the books, right? Trying to just totally copy it. And then I had to stop doing that. And, you know, now it's like 20, 30 years later, I'm going back and I'm finding, I find myself going back and copying what I'm seeing on like the website of a miniature company, just trying to like match it perfectly. Because it's actually one of like, it's like a core teaching technique is to like copy somebody else's work. And there's so much to learn by doing that.
Yeah, just doing master copies.
Yeah. You know, me, one out of every 10 mil models I do now, I just try to copy somebody else's idea out of another source just so I can learn. There's always a lot of hidden information in doing that.
Leave only a thin line of black around the edge. When painting eyes, it's best to choose an off-white color. Using pure white can make your figure look freakish and unnatural. To finish off the eyes, paint in the pupils with a small black dot.
That part right there where you add that mole on Sorce's face. So when we shot this, first of all, that was one take for Ron. So sometimes we paint stuff and the brush would slip and there'd be a mistake, and sometimes we'd leave it on camera to show that you can cover up, and other times we would just cut and reset it and repaint it and then go back and do it. But Ron painted that mole on Sorce's face first take, and the fun part is the look on your face when you did it was one of a professional pleased with himself. You just like that came in and you just went bink, and then the look on your face said, yep, I know how to do that. I nailed it that time. That was perfect.
That's funny. Yeah, when you're watching that face get painted, you could tell that I'm like, that I can't see a lot of her, like right side of her face, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, just watching myself do the mole, like when I watched this video last night, I was like, bam, nailed it.
We even spent a lot of time, like, you know, the miniatures are very small, and even nowadays with lenses, lens options being more available, it's still hard to get a good image of a miniature, in my opinion. And at that time, we just didn't have access to those, the things that would make it better on the budget that we had.
Yeah.
And so we were constantly just trying to fight, keeping everything in focus and making it look good. And we ran tests and ran footage with miniatures on it and be like, all right, well, if the camera's set up like this and we have these filters, then the reds look like this. We want to make sure that the reds looked really good and yellows looked really good, and that the blacks had some detail in them, so that we it was quite a bit of a dance and a balance. It's one that I would still pay attention to today. You want to make sure those details are there, but I don't think it would be quite the level of effort to achieve similar effects as it was.
Because I remember that I made like a piece of card, and I had put all the E3 colors on it, and we would put it under the camera just to make sure that the actual colors were coming in properly.
That was fun as a film nerd for me, because they do similar things on shoots when they're dealing with film, is they'll put up a card that has standardized colors printed on it, so they can see how those colors are. We had the exact same thing. It was just with P3 paints instead of standardized colors.
It was like last night I was taking photographs of something I just got done painting, and like I photograph it and I look at it on a screen, look at the model in my hand, and I'm going like, it's not the same thing, And so I find myself manipulating the photo in Photoshop, not so much to make it look better, so it actually looks like what I actually painted.
Well, in mixed colors with lights on Get Your Paint On, a lot of times, like, you can see painters' hands, like Jordan's hands, when they end up on camera, and they might have a really reddish tone to it, or sometimes even look a little green or really blown out. And it can kind of ruin the overall effect of the image. But the problem is we're trying to make it exposed and look good for the miniature. So as long as the miniature's paint and lighting looks good, sometimes that brush or the miniatures, the painter's hand, just, you got to let it go.
So like when I was watching this video, like I was watching myself paint this red and thinking I would never paint red like that now. But this red looks really good, and it looks really good in person too. Because I kept on thinking like the thing about this red is it's really achievable for somebody with new painting skills. Like, granted, I got years and years of like handling a brush, so I got good brush control, but there's nothing like magical really going on here. You're just putting the paint on the model.
Right.
There's really no crazy color theory going on. I'm not doing two brush blending, I'm not mixing, additives to the paints. I'm just thinning them down with water and just putting them directly on the model, right? And so it's like, well, how would I do this now? Like, like the studio versions of this, we would be like mixing blue and brown into the red as the shadow, because you're trying to put color and shadow. Then we would be making this like salmon color and highlighting the model in like the salmon. Then we would be doing like ink glazes over the salmon, right? Because it makes it brilliant. Because the problem with the red is, if like most highlights for reds are like usually orange, salmon, or pink, which doesn't look good. But if you just highlight the model with salmon and then you ink glaze red over the whole model, you end up getting like a deep red, a medium red, and a really bright red.
Right.
And that's how you paint red, right? And that's one of the many ways you can paint red. And it's hard to, like, you don't want to teach that out of the gate, but this red works just fine.
It's too intimidating.
Yeah. You scare people.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it wasn't until recently until I started actually reading about, like, why does blue and brown work with red? I remember when I was painting the original Morvana, I was taking a color theory course at a local community college. I was looking, not like a non-credited class, just like a little night class, right? And I was taking color theory. And that's when I started realizing, like, you can use other colors to shade and highlight colors. And that's when I realized that like purple actually is a really good color to shade green with, you know? And if you look at Morvana, like you'll notice that there's actually purple tones in the shadow of the green. That's when I first was discovering this, right? And I remember, I wanted to tell everyone at the time, like, if you're a miniature painter and you want to like, learn, you want to get to, the next stage of your painting knowledge, like start taking like little art classes on color theory at your local community college. Like it does wonders.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely, miniature painting is an art form. So there is a lot of crossover between, quote unquote, miniature painting and traditional art. Kind of like what you're saying about doing zenithal priming and having a black undercoat and then spraying it white and then glazing colors over it. Classic technique for grisaille painting on canvas is the same thing, painting everything in black and white and then painting colors over the top of it to let those values come through.
So like, okay, like I recently painted some red on some wargaming figures, and I did my normal thing, which I undercoated it black and I sprayed white over it, right? And it's like, okay, I started there, but what I did is I just got like, I put like a red glaze over the red uniform, right?
Right.
Because it's a glaze, it's thin, but because it's a strong opacity pink, like the areas that were airbrushed white were bright red, and the areas that were still kind of black undercoat were a dark red, and that kind of like in between zone, it's called the Terminator zone, is like, it's a combination of the two, right? But then it's just like, okay, then I kind of made like a darker red, and I just kind of glazed it into where the shadows were already on the model. That's all I did. And it looked fine, and it just took seconds.
Yeah.
And at 3 or 4 feet away on the game table, you're never going to see the difference. But when you get up close to your face, you're going to definitely see a difference. You're going to be all like, one's obviously better than the other. But one took 17 hours, the other one took 35 minutes.
Right.
On the game table, you'll never see the difference.
Intent is a big thing, and it's hard to get over, right? Because, I think it's very easy. Again, I say this from my own personal experience as an anecdote, but just, there's a lot of pressure to want to do excellent paint jobs on every single miniature.
Yeah.
And while you need to become uncomfortable and try new techniques and do things to get better, it's very easy to get into the trap that every miniature needs to be the best miniature you can possibly ever paint.
Yeah. Because a lot of times people will spend a lot of time on like their character models, the centerpiece, big beautiful ones, and they'll spend less time on their infantry or their troopers. There's that philosophy. It all, like you just said, it's all intent, right? Like, what are you trying to do? You want every figure to be a work of art, and like, you're going to be logging a lot of time into every figure. But are you just trying to get figures painted on the game table? Then like, you need to speed up. You need to find all those techniques to just get it good enough on the table. Because another thing that happens too is once you start playing the game and your dice are flying by your head, like those mediocre paint jobs all of a sudden start looking really good. Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
When you start thinking about the you're painting beyond the miniature and as the army as a whole, right? So how does this all look together?
Yeah.
There's that rake I was talking about.
Yeah. This was interesting to watch, for me to watch paint this one, because like I like how the pink, the composition, like it's not just in the mouth, like there's parts of pink on the other areas of the rake.
Yeah.
So like the composition is really nice. I don't really talk about composition in this.
10 drops of mixing medium and 3 drops of water. Using the base hobby brush, add 2.
I think this is my favorite paint section of this video. But I think probably more just because the ironclad had techniques I was mostly familiar with. Sorsha had a lot of techniques I was familiar with, and I think you washing over the white, doing this, and then kind of picking out some of those pink spots.
Yeah.
Was a little newer to me. In what you could do with painting.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's using all the same. It's using these these simple techniques, but it's just how you're applying them very differently,
Right.
right? I do this a lot of times with bone, like skeletons. I still use this technique. It works really well.
Yeah.
For the second layer of wash, add more paint to the wash that you have already mixed. Mix in 2 more brush beads of Scorn Red. And
When I was editing each of those color swatches and the names for each thing was extremely tedious. I bring it up for no other reason than my memory of it was, if I had to do that nowadays, it would be a snap, right? I would just be able to knock it out much faster. But at this time, it was just, I was having to invent ways to do things with the tools I had. And again, I was not as experienced in After Effects and doing graphics, so it was much more limited and had to get a little more creative with how I did things. So even when I look at them and go, oh, that looks kind of terrible and outdated, and I do much better now. I was also working with different tools than I have available to me now.
Mix a thin wash using a little carnal pink, murderous magenta, and Scorn
And truth
Red.
be told, it's still not that far off of what I would actually do.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is I just, I don't know if it's the approach for doing this video, while some of the details and technology might change, or how we talk about stuff, I think the overall presentation still holds up.
Yeah, it does. Because I was I was slightly worried when I watched this again. I was just like, am I gonna be embarrassing myself? And then I ended up watching it. I'm like, actually, this is still pretty good. It's still pretty fun to watch,
Washed into the flesh. Notice how the
maybe if there's a blog review of like classic miniatures painting techniques, this one can get filed under the dated but still useful category.
Yeah. Because that's one thing I notice a lot. Like, teaching some classes and judging painting competitions is like, there's a phase in a painter's career when they kind of hit that intermediate level, when they start learning like basically these techniques and a few others. But what happens is their models start looking better and better, but their hours logged on per figure starts getting astronomical.
Oh yeah.
And you look at these figures, you're like, how many days did you spend on this? And they're like, I put 73 hours in this one figure, and it looks really good. And it's just like, at that point, it's like, it's all about achieving that same look or even a better look, but like reducing hours from like 70 hours to a model to like 3 or 4 or 5 hours.
Right.
Like, and that's a huge jump in someone's skill level. And I love talking to those painters. Those are some of my favorite painters to talk to, because I love giving them the techniques. To be like, okay, this is how you get this cool effect, but in like a tenth of the time.
Right.
And that's all I search for now. It's just like, how can I get this cool technique really fast? And I just combined them all. Doesn't always work, but still learning. Always still learning.
That's good to keep in mind. Because miniature painting, video editing, all of that, it's easy to do the techniques that you've been doing for a long time, and then you're saying that working on your speed and efficiency to execute those techniques is a next level technique. Whereas I think that the natural reaction, and certainly mine, is to fight the idea that everything has to be new. What's the new technique? What's the new way to do this? How do I improve making it look cool? And forgetting to focus like, well, I already know everything I need to know. So how can I use what I already know to execute more efficiently?
Mm-hmm. Because like a lot of times too, it's just like it's paint. It's like also knowing what not to paint.
Yeah.
Like I just don't even paint undersides of models anymore. Or I look back at some of the artists I've worked with at Privateer Press in the past, and I've seen techniques where like I've watched a miniature painter paint a model and a really good model in, it was like 45 minutes. I think it's Magnus 2. You should look at that model in the catalog because it's a 45-minute paint job. And what's happening is the face is painted real nicely and the area around the face is painted nicely, but as the model gets away from the face, it's painted really quickly. In some cases, it's just a base coat.
Yeah.
Not even highlighted or shadowed, but you don't notice it because your focus goes right to the face. And then the brain kind of fills in the rest.
Wow.
You know, so it's like if you can find on a model like where the focal point is, like where the eye wants to like immediately go to, and just put more effort on that one location and paint less on the other locations, then people don't even notice, right? So there's tricks like that too.
Making me want to try that as an experiment. Just
Yeah.
being like, and paint these miniatures, but only paint details like right around the face and surrounding area.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably even enhance that technique by when you do like when you just kind of undercoat it black and you airbrush white, is just kind of like actually airbrush where you want the person to look. You know,
Oh, okay, yeah,
like actually just shine the spotlight on it. Because there were a few years ago, I actually went, I toured a bunch of conventions all over the States. And I wasn't really playing in a lot of games. I was just walking around, like observing people's tables and miniature collections. And I was just kind of like writing notes like, why does this look good? Or does this not look so good? You know, and I remember multiple times just seeing these displays where I was just like, oh my, this is so gorgeous. And then I would get closer and I'd be like, how does this person paint all these models and make them look so good? And you get like closer and closer, then you get to a point where you're like 2 feet from the model and you're like, those things are not painted well at all. And I'm going like how do you paint a model holding it in your hands and paint it and it not look good? But knowing that when you put it on the table and you step back 3 feet and there's another 100 of them like it, why does it look so good? You know, because this person has all these models painted and they look great, but somehow that person had to transcend it not looking good a foot away when they're painting it. And that's a trick that I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, that's it, Ron.
There you go.
That was our video. Well, this was a lot of fun hanging out with you and talking about this.
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
It's been a long time.
Look at this. Friendly Joe Productions.
Oh yeah.
That
was me before I was Privateer Press. I would like to think this video had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, oh man. See, okay, now I could just sit here and have nostalgic flashbacks on all the names in this list, but instead I'm going to say thank you everybody for hanging out with us, listening to Ron and I talk about making this video, listen to Ron talk about all sorts of cool paint techniques. Yeah, we really just hope that you had a good time hanging out and enjoyed yourself.
Right on. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.